Hey, what's up? I'm back. I'm glad to be back. Glad to see you, brothers. And I want to touch on this topic. And the topic I want to touch on is that black people naturally have an Eastern culture. They have developed a Western culture through colonization, through slavery, through oppression, so on and so forth, similar to the Native Americans. Right? Through that oppression and boarding schools and whatnot, we have developed a Western mindset and a Western culture, which is a dressed up way of saying a white culture. Now, the Eastern culture is very family based, family orientated. It's not so focused on money and material gain. It's more spiritual. It's more honor based. It's more principle based, things of that nature. You have somebody that's outside, homeless, you bring him into your house, you feed him. That is the pure Eastern way. And of course, even people of the East, a lot of the times do not adopt those customs because they are to some regards westernized. And understand, I'm not dealing with an actual region per se, because you have South Americans who have an Eastern culture. The indigenous South Americans have an Eastern culture. The indigenous Native Americans have an Eastern culture. I'm saying that opposed to white Western culture, right? So the Eastern culture was very honorable, biblical. It goes into helping your brother, helping, the person next to you, letting them in your house, feeding them, clothing them. That was a part of honor, protecting your guests. Literally, you would protect your guests with your lives. That's how serious the Eastern culture was. They were very close-knit families and so on and so forth. It wasn't so focused on money and greed and covetousness. That was a negative thing, in the Eastern culture, although there's always those bad apples. Now, Western culture is fully based upon individualism. People barely speak to their family. It's all about lust, greed. The same way they got what they got was through those things, the lust, the greed. Basically, the thought process of the American Psycho. If you ever watched that movie, The American Psycho, that is the thought process of the West, especially the top echelon of people in the West. They think like that. Okay, that is, Western culture, and this is why you have certain people that say black culture is nothing but a microcosm of white culture, which I've said that recently, and that's a fact. Okay, black culture is a microcosm of white culture, and this is why you don't care for your brother, you don't care for your own people. It's for that reason, and everything is about getting the bag, getting the bag, getting the bag. You sell your soul, just get the bag. That's all that matters, which is a very vile and low character based thinking. The Native Americans had a saying of the white man. They said, the white man holds nothing sacred. What does that mean? That means by any means, he'll get what he wants. And they don't care about morality. Right? So that's the difference between the Western and the Eastern way of thinking. When it comes to marriage, the wifely duties, the wifely role. That goes back to the East. That goes back to the original way things were supposed to be. You men, you black men in particular, have veered very far from that. Like I said, through slavery, they even put the woman over the man, right? Which caused a lot of confusion. Okay, so now the men are like in a subservient position. All you have to do is listen to R&B. A lot of those things that those men are saying in R&B is pretty much what a woman should be saying to a man. Oh, I'll get on my knees for you, baby, and this and that. And let me tell you something. Women naturally don't like that. Naturally, when a man does that, it gives them a disdain for that man. They look at that as ew, it's disgusting. Like, I mean, they like it because of the conflict in their mind. You know, they're torn between the two because their mind is not right. Their mind is westernized, but deep down they don't like that. Right? That's something you have to understand, because the original way things were was a way that was natural, and it was conducive for the way we are created. The way the Western mindset is antagonistic to the way that we're created and the way that we're designed. It's antagonistic to that. So the Eastern way is totally different from the Western way, and it's a better way. It's a better culture. So you've adopted a culture that was worse than the culture you had before. Not only that, there's been a lot of things that have been added to the culture that you developed as well, like gangster rap music that has been heavily promoted amongst you purposely, drugs in the community that was done purposely. You know, the whole mindset, the media in general, it's very powerful. You know, we've seen that in the past 5 decades, how powerful the media is. And you're now stuck in a position, right, where you don't know why you're being looked at the way you're being looked at, but it's this synthetic culture that the enemy has given to you. Okay, which is really not our original culture and mindset. But it's kind of funny because when people try to go back to certain aspects of the Eastern culture, they demonize it. You know, they actually demonize it. For example, you know, the concept of polygyny, right? A man with multiple women, right? That's a thing that's demonized and looked down upon, but that was what we were doing before. We were doing that before. We have a high libido. We're very masculine men, you know, so that's normal for us as black men, and they know that, so they demonize that. You know, even the aspect of having children today in this particular society is like a burden. When you go back to how it used to be, you know, it was a blessing. It was a blessing to have children. A woman was happy to have children. A man was happy to have children. Now it's like, oh my goodness, it's like bad news. Showing you this place is completely out of whack. All right? Completely out of whack. So I just wanted to touch on that. You know, just kind of speak on the topic of the fact that, you know, black people have an Eastern culture naturally. You can leave your comments in the comment section. I'll check them out. And with that, I'm gone.